Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Michael Zhao, founder and CEO at Yellowbird, uses matchmaking technology to connect the right people in the right location with the right experience for the job. Michael, so excited to chat with you and learn about not only what you're doing at Yellowbird, but your journey as an entrepreneur and also the companies that you've been a part of and that you've touched as an investor as well. It's so exciting to chat with somebody with a wealth of knowledge to really not only kind of unpack the experience of the founder and this in tech in particular, but also what you see in the market. So before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started Yellowbird?
Well, first, thanks, Julian. I'm excited to be here. I really am. Before Yellowbird, it's hard to believe there was a before Yellowbird. But we're only three and a half years old now. But before Yellowbird, I was in the satellite communications world. So we were dealing in, it sounds really eggheady stuff, but basically geostationary satellites. What it really means is in the satellite business, you're beaming up and you're landing data from one location to another. And you can think of it from a use case scenario, kind of like you do your DirecTV or your TV signal, except it's bidirectional. And I did that for about 15 years. So it was a good business. Enjoyed every bit of it, but I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. And what was the transition? You're focusing on satellite technology, but now you're running a company that helps people in job and connecting the two kind of marketplaces. What got you into a two-sided marketplace model from a product sense?
So specifically what Yellowbird does is we focus on environmental health and safety professionals. And so we're not just matching just anybody, but really it's educated professionals that are focused on the environmental health and safety. So you can think of folks like the OSHA people or EPA, a lot of folks that need training in safety and things to that effect. What I was doing is I was doing satellite in a lot of high consequence industries. So it was a lot of areas that had, unfortunately, deaths and injuries. And so we would be selling services to help people call 911 or get help if something bad happened. And so you kind of, my friends used to call me a storm chaser because we used to do a whole lot of work after hurricanes and things like that. It's a natural segue into doing this. I love the people aspect of technology. I was literally dealing 22,000 miles in the sky most of the time. And I like now what we do is match people to needs. And so that got me there. And then I really like the Uber model of the world, but I didn't particularly like the income of the Uber model of the world. So Yellowbird has a lot of the same aspect of the Uber or Grubhubs or two-sided marketplace features, but you can actually leverage people's skills and then they make a very good wage doing what we do. So that was the main reason.
Yeah. And in particular, what was the incumbent before that? Was it just pen and paper? Was it like, or spreadsheets and databases? Like what was it
All
before
of
that?
it. I mean,
Really?
yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. I mean, there wasn't one way, and there's still, as much as I like to say we're changing the world of EHS labor, there still isn't one way. I'd love to say that Yellowbird was the only way people were doing it, but we are not quite there yet. The reality is that there's 50 ways of accomplishing the same objective, but none of them are all encompassing and none of them tech enabled. So you'd have individuals that were on your team that were responsible for safety. That happens a lot, especially in small business, where you have the general manager who's also the HR person, who's also the coffee buyer, and is also the safety manager, right? And then you get into bigger organizations and they'll have a safety department, but then they have 30 or 50 locations or 100 locations or 500 locations. And now they're dealing with outsourcing to independent contractors all across the country to try and execute. And it's really clunky. So the vision initially, and we've changed, not changed materially, but originally it was, okay, who used to do this and is retiring? And if they're retired, well, maybe they'd stay engaged if we could put them on a platform to let them go out and do this type of work. It's kind of a continuing your career on your terms. Now we have people from all ilks of life, and we have over 5,000 people on the platform already and growing fast.
Yeah. One thing I find it so fascinating running a two-sided marketplace myself is the qualifying part, because that is such a critical and piece to the success of both sides, right? Intaking quality people and then helping those quality people get hired and then creates that kind of continuous cycle. How do you think about the qualification process and what kind of testing have you done to really hone in not only do they have the credentials, but they also are someone who is a good actor or will kind of complete the task at hand.
Yeah, I could tell you run a marketplace because you're asking a perfect marketplace question. Yes, it's the hardest thing that we do.
Yeah.
I always say, we deal with insurance companies and law firms and big contractors and all this stuff. And they ask the same question. How do you know what your professionals do? The easy answer is we do background checks. We go and check their certifications that they upload. We validate some of the data that they've given us through our third-party validation. But the hardest part of what we do, I think you actually contend with too, which is how do you represent a human being appropriately? And how do you find each person's superpower, right? Like you could have 3 people have the same certification, the same city. One happens to be of Hispanic descent. The other person happens to be somebody who is from just middle America, and a third person is from Indian descent, and they all have different walks of life. They've all worked in different environments. They've all done different things. And so their certification is exactly the same, but which one's going to be the best person? I just use their ethnicity and their background, but we also look at where they've worked and what they've done and what their experience is. Indexing all of that is actually the hardest thing we do by far.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting just like defining the index, but in terms of, I think cultural background is extremely important, especially for what community or what individual it's going to serve, and how much of what you're doing has a human layer to it, being that there has to be kind of some, I guess, intuitive decision making a part of this process. How do you really kind of add resources and subtract resources, that component? Because for me, that's kind of the hardest part, is how much time do we have somebody allocated to going through this process and making that intuitive decision making, which is, I think it's harder to index that kind of stuff.
Well, not to plug your business, but I'll tell you what, in the development side of the house and using developers that use native language processing and that can use data indexing in the best way, and our needs as a platform change significantly. I said the hardest thing we do is actually to identify the superpowers of our professionals, and I say that a lot, and that's very true. But honestly, the hardest thing we do is actually the thing that everybody does, which is coordination of time and calendars and syncing up the when and where and how of somebody's efforts. And it should be so easy in the world we live in, between all of these restaurant and Grubhubs and Ubers and all these other scheduling things, and yet we spend more time than I'd care to admit brute forcing the scheduling aspect of Yellowbird. And it's crazy, because it should be the easiest thing that we do, but it's not.
That layer, like the coordination piece, is difficult, but I mean, if you find a solution for it, let me know, because I think that's something we spend a lot of the time on. Mm-hmm. But it's such a necessary part of the business, I think. You're thinking about, I know you've been a part of a few startups, and you've also invested and been an advisor and been around the community for a while. What are good companies doing, and where are founders kind of missing in that process, or needing to take on, say, the learning curve when building a company? Because I think that's kind of the biggest component, is the foundational piece, and not skipping any steps, because it oftentimes either causes technical debt or it comes back to bite you in some way. What are some companies that you've seen doing exceptionally well that should be replicated, and where do other founders kind of miss in the foundational building of their startup?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. I use a term, I actually used it a little while ago with somebody that I was meeting with, the saying that what gets you here won't always get you there.
Yeah.
And I use that term a lot, and it sounds really simple and kitschy, but what we needed 3 years ago and what we needed 2 years ago and what we need today are very different. Yeah. In fact, we've had people leave. We've had people join that would not have done well when we were 3 people and a goat. We were doing things so manually, trying to figure out if even there was product market fit, and if somebody was going to buy this service, and was it viable, and if it was viable in Phoenix, would it be viable in Indiana? Would it be viable in New York City? COVID hit, so we learned a ton through that process. I would say the best executives or best startup people that I know embrace the fact that progress is better than perfection, and making sure that you're making progress in the right direction. I kind of liken it to when you're teaching a kid, and I don't know if you've ever been around. I know you don't have kids, Julian, but when you're teaching a kid to ride a bike, when they first start riding, they're kind of going weaving back and forth, almost falling off, and you're like, you're doing it, but the reality is they're not doing it very well. They're just doing it, right? I mean, right. They're almost going to fall off. They're almost going to crash, but you're so excited that they're on two wheels, right? And that's kind of what being in a startup is like. It's okay. My goal for today is just not to crash. My goal today is not to be on the Tour de France. So it's just to be going the right direction, and hopefully when the wheels stop, you can put your foot down before you fall off the bike, right? And then 2 years later, well, now, maybe I'm doing a little bit better. Now my goal is not to have balance. Now my goal is build some other skills around the bicycle and so forth. And so I would say not being so focused on any one thing, as weird as that sounds, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. It's whack-a-mole. It's totally whack-a-mole. You think, okay, this is the thing that's stopping me from being successful. I'm going to focus on that. And then you figure that out. And then this is the thing that's going to stop me from being successful. And you're being incrementally more successful the whole time. And that's what I've learned. I've done this 3 times. And each time it's like having a kid. You forgot how difficult it was in the early stages, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with business, right? You just one foot in front of the other.
It's fascinating, especially because I think sounds like the way kind of your model works, and maybe similar to the model we run, whereas the majority of whatever's built is going to be for those workers, right? And then you obviously kind of take maybe a cut, or maybe there's a percentage, there's a fee or whatever. But it's a long-term game if you run the model in that way, versus when it's a gig economy model. I think you can have a little bit more hyper growth because of how you kind of play with the economics of it. But as we've seen in the more recent years, becoming more and more under fire and criticized because of the lack of benefits towards the workers component, right? The supply. But my question to you is, how do you get through the challenge of waiting and being patient for that long-term, I guess, payout later on when things have built? Because it's a hard process. It takes time. What kind of keeps you motivated? What micro decisions are you making to stay on course while you're waiting for that large pool to build up? And is there anything that you've seen be successful during that time period to kind of incrementally increase in terms of that pool of operating capital?
Wow, you've asked a lot of questions in one question there.
No.
I love it. I don't mind at all. This is enjoyable for me. I like talking about the journey, and hopefully I can give some insights. First of all, I'm still figuring it out. Let's be honest. We just closed our seed round. Technically, we're not closed, but we're committed. We're over committed on our seed round. We've just raised $5 million. We are now over committed to just over 6. So it's an exciting time, but candidly, there have been moments over the last couple of years that I was not sure how we were going to survive just from a capital perspective. It's hard to cash flow a business like this. You expect when you win a big award, and I guess the first statement, you asked me about the capital. So reality is that you're always on the edge of your skis the first few years in business. It's just the way it's going to be. You have to kind of accept that as, we're going to figure this out. I have a mantra. You're like, we're going to figure this out. We're doing the great things. We're going to come up with a way. And as long as you have that mindset, and just honestly, just not throwing in the towel is probably the most important piece of all of it. There have been times that I've had to borrow from my 401k. There have been times that I have had to go to an investor that I'd already put the amount that they would need to put in, and say, look, I've got payroll and I've got checks coming in, but I need a gap. The hardest thing with a technology company like ours, both of ours, is you don't have any assets to leverage with a bank. So you can't get a line of credit. And if you're growing as fast as some companies do grow, and mine is one of them, I'm very blessed to say that, we can outgrow our cash. And that's scary as all get out, because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be so successful, I'm going to run out of money. And it's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. It's actually, I never, when I was younger, I never actually thought that was a thing. Oh, well, if you're generating enough business, there's always money available.
No.
Nope, not always. I
Yeah.
mean, really, so I guess the first piece of the equation is just always have the mindset of I'm going to figure it out, and work with people as well as you can, and be open and honest and truthful. And you don't have to tell stories to get people to be patient with you. The other piece of the equation is, and I actually was in the same conversation as earlier that I was talking to this lady in our office here. I was saying that it's really, really challenging when you have the wrong people, which we all will at some point have the wrong people. It's if you're running a business, it happens. How long do you try to make them the right person? Or when do you say, okay, this is not working and I need to make a change?
Yeah.
And I am notorious for waiting too long. I am notorious in trying to figure out how that's going to figure out working. And I guess the greatest advice that I can give anybody is know the benchmarks of whether you're being successful or not. It's so hard in the middle of this journey to actually stop and take a breath and say, okay, from where I started to where I am to where I'm going to, where I want to be, can I see that I'm making real progress?
Yeah.
Not I'm going to lie to myself because I'm working hard, because working hard means nothing. We all work hard.
Yeah.
Everybody works hard.
Yeah.
I agree. Am I getting the results? Right.
Yeah.
And I've had to do that a couple of times with my wife and say, look, this is working. And stick with us, please. I need your support.
Yeah.
I know I took an 80% pay cut to do this. Don't remind me again.
Right? Yeah. I guess that's something that I think I've asked a couple founders about. But outside of your co-founder relationships or even relationships with your team, how do you get your team in line, and what kind of conversations are you having, or what kind of system do you have with them to have them on your side and be that support network? For me, at least, it's communication and it's really being honest about where things are. What have you seen that's been successful for other founders who are navigating those decisions of like, yeah, I'm taking a pay cut, but not only is this something worth investing time in, it's going to be paying dividends in larger amounts and in freedom and ability and connections and network and things you can't always quantify.
Right. So that's such an important and difficult question. I married a wonderful woman who is risk averse. She does not like the entrepreneurial journey. She does not like the risk taking of who I am. We are very much opposite in so many ways. Our values are the same. Our love for our children and love for our life and journey is the same, but honestly, there's been times, and I've actually said this to her, you should have married an accountant. You should have somebody who goes to work 9 to 5, makes a paycheck. And she actually would have probably been happier at times if she did, if I'm being honest. But, she's exactly the opposite of me in many, many ways. And it's not a bad thing. She keeps the house in order, but I also have to listen when, okay, it's becoming too much.
Yeah.
I had I'm very fortunate, and I do acknowledge that. I've had successes and failures, but I'm very fortunate that I've had money and capital to do this with. Not enough that I could sustain us now, but early on, if I needed a few months, I could afford it.
Sure.
But still, we hit a point where she said, "Look, this big house is costing us a lot of money, and you're not making the money that you were." And we sold a nice, fancy, beautiful home. Yeah. And we bought a smaller home, and we paid for it. And we don't have a mortgage, and the whole family, the way I say it is the whole family had to sacrifice. My family loves our house. They actually like it more than our last house. So right. maybe my ego had to sacrifice, if I'm being honest with myself. But it is one of those things that she said, look, if you're going to do this, we have to make a change because we have an $800 water bill.
Yeah.
And she goes, I live in Arizona. Don't be surprised by that. But and we had lots of air conditioners. I live in Arizona, right? The power bill is expensive. And she basically said, look, if you're going to do this, then we need to make some changes. And I had to be willing to listen and stay married, which is always nice.
Yeah, those conversations are so key, I think, in terms of just like not only setting expectations, but also clearing your mind as a founder and having your house in order a lot of times. But I guess in the ups and downs of business, especially with, I think, a two-sided marketplace, especially with people, it's difficult when dealing with economic circumstances. And I guess,
Yes.
how do you kind of think about operating your business model through just external pressures being around the corner
Mhm.
on honestly every which way? And even within my sector, it's
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of people, there's a lot of jobs, but there's a lot of risk averseness in terms of hiring and doing these. So how do you kind of operate at that model, or how do you think about operating when working with external factors?
So Yellowbird, essentially, if you look at what we do for a living, we talk to people who are running complex risk and safety and environmental situations. So if you're a construction company and I'm working on a bid, and if I win this bid and it's 100 miles from where my headquarters is, I'm going to need to get subcontractors to do all these various things. I'm going to need a safety manager on site because, one, it's the law,
Yeah.
but two, I need to make sure that people are all safe, right?
Right.
And in that circumstance, our model is about surge demand. Now, I don't call it that, and I probably have some people in my company that would throw a shoe at me right now for even making that statement. But reality is that what we're really great at is the right people at the right location with the right skills.
Yeah.
Now, again, I've just raised a bunch of venture capital, so I'm used to venture capital type of questions. They're like, well, what does your average professional make for income? I mean, can they do this full time yet? And the honest answer is no, they can't do this full time yet. We have some people making full time wages. We've got people who are making six figures with us, but the vast majority have other jobs. They're doing this as ancillary income. They're going and doing site surveys. They're going and doing a safety training of some sort. They're helping execute a large program, say 100 sites in 100 locations. They'll go and be 5 of those sites, and then we have a bunch of people doing that. But the quick answer to your question is, I look at it as if I'm offering enough value through the equation, through the cycles, people are going to stick with us. And I can't set the wrong expectation. If I went to every pro and said, you sign up on our platform and I'm going to give you full-time wages immediately, I would have 5,000, maybe 4,995 angry people. Maybe there 5 that are like, yep, you did it, but the rest are going to be pretty ticked off at me, right?
Right.
So you have to kind of set your expectations correctly. It's like, look, our platform is really great for gig and for surge needs, and we hope to get there that you can make the choice if you want to do this full time. But even on the low wage stuff like Ubers and again, our average person makes like 75, 80 bucks an hour. I mean, they're not low wage. And some of our jobs can be weeks. Some could be days, some could be hours, but most are, between 2 and 5 days. That being said, that's a good income, but I don't want to set the expectation that you're going to be able to live on Yellowbird yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually where Uber kind of went sideways, is people start doing it full time, and then they start realizing that they're not making enough to do it full time, and then they got ticked off at Uber.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't really designed for that, but okay.
Yeah, the expectation setting, I think, is something that marketplaces will live and die on. Without that honest transparency, people are able to make their own decisions, and if you're not acknowledging that through the way you set it up, you obviously end up with situations where people are upset or disgruntled by the circumstance. Thinking about the last few years and even last year, tell us a little bit about the progress, the traction. What are you excited about in terms of the current outcomes, but what are you excited about the next year in terms of features or that you might be adding, maybe initiatives that you're doing? Tell us a little bit about the traction and what you're excited about.
Oh, I'm in such an exciting place right now. I can start to dream again. When you're raising capital and you're burning capital, and so you're always kind of worried about the next, next 3 to 5 months. You're not thinking about the next 2 to 5 years. And we're now at that point where I can start imagining again a little bit about starting to execute, which is it's my happy place as just a human being.
Yeah.
Again, what we do right now is a relatively rudimentary, but it's a very difficult thing to do, which is right people with the right skills. What we don't do is the right personalities and the right backgrounds per se. So the personality aspect of what's your secret sauce in your personality, where are you really shining and thriving? It's the hardest thing in a gig economy, right? I hate to keep using the ride share examples, but they added that button of silent please because there were a lot of drivers that were talking the ear off of their riders. And they're like, dude, I just want to go to the market. Don't talk to me, right? And that was a learning. They had to have gotten that feedback from people. You were getting 1 star, and they're asking, "Why are you giving me 1 star?" It's because they talked my ear off.
Yeah.
And then they over time added the silent please or prefer, whatever it happens to be, right? So where we're going as a company is we're going to work on personality matching, not just skills and locations and geography. We're going to focus on AI matching, where we're taking data points off of your resume, your LinkedIn, your profile that we've built internally, and we're going to use the if-then statement. So if you are like this other pro who's been successful in this scenario, then you will be a good match in this scenario. Yeah. And we're going to build more AI around that, or machine learning around that. I'm super excited about that. And then upskilling. I'm very excited about upskilling. I mentioned firefighters earlier. Yeah. I think I mentioned firefighters earlier. No, I didn't. I was talking to somebody else. So, sorry. So I was talking to somebody earlier, and I said, we do a lot of fire analysis for insurance companies, going in and making sure that they're up to fire codes and things like that. And retired and active firefighters actually are on our platform for that. Well, those people theoretically could be upskilled to also do hazardous materials management. I know it sounds dorky, but that's a real thing. Like, when you're doing steel plating or chroming or any type of manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, and you're dealing with chemicals, who better to do that than maybe an ex-fireman who has been around that kind of stuff, but maybe they're not trained on what that looks like. Yeah. So if we can upskill those people, I'm super excited about that, because you can open the doors for where they didn't even think they had income opportunities.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. The upskilling part, I think, is where a lot of time and investment can go to, but it's a hard part, because it does take a lot of resources to kind of attack that and do it in a way that benefits not only the workers, but also the opportunities that they'll be able to have access to. What's thinking about where Yellowbird is today? What are some of the biggest challenges that you face?
I don't know if you have ever done the Jim Collins books, but right people in the right chairs doing the right jobs, or as he says, the right behinds on the bus and the wrong behinds off the bus. Yeah. Making sure that you have the right people with the right vision to execute. I still worry about that constantly. Are we spending our resources in the right areas?
Yeah. Yeah. And if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
What a great question. The quick answer is, I don't know. Yeah. Now, that's not the VC answer. Yeah. The venture capital community wants to say we're going to exit in 3 to 5 years, and we're going to get acquired by a insurance company, or by a consulting company, or by a large contractor of some sort. Those could all very well happen. Yeah. We're growing at such a rapid rate that it's pretty exciting, and we will have those options. There is also the option of continuing to grow and see what things look like in 3 to 5 years. If we, when we get to 100 million in revenue, you get to really ask yourselves, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
I'm not married to my companies anymore. I'm okay with whatever route works best for the company, as long as we're being successful.
Yeah.
We're having fun. I will get offers to be acquired. I already know that. Yeah. I'm not sure when that will happen and whether or not we'll want to take it, but that's the reason we all do this, right? At the end of the day, take care of our family, take care of each other, and have a good time.
Yeah.
And I'm still having a good time, and most of the time my family's tolerating it.
I love that. And I know I always like to go through this section really quickly, but I call these the founder FAQ. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and we'll see what we get. What's the hardest part about your job today?
Staying out of the way of other people doing their jobs.
Yeah, that's a good one. How do you maintain culture in a remote, and it sounds like you have some in office, but how do you maintain culture? What structural things would you advise other founders implement?
All right. So our cultural values are: be awesome, lifelong learning, own it, authenticity, and be spicy. And those values as a company, although they sound really quirky and weird, we live up to those. We have a good time here. I mean, we have spicy Mondays, we call them. It started on Zoom, where during COVID we all would have a theme. We had Sesame Street theme, or we had Hawaiian shirt theme, or favorite hat theme. Just to keep it fun. We've done a good job. We really have, but it's hard. It's really, really hard, especially as we have some remote, some in. I say in office, but even our in office people aren't in office every day.
Yeah.
The whole culture of waking up and working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 7 days a week. Yeah, that's a CEO.
That's you.
7 days a week if you don't want to work the 8th day. No, 5 days a week being in the office all the time. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm 47 years old. I've been around a long time, and I'm kind of the elder statesman in the group nowadays. And I have to kind of get used to how to maintain that culture and listen to the team and focus on output and not hours, which is the most important thing that any of us can do. And measuring output is hard.
Yeah. For other founders out there, what advice would you give them in terms of hiring the right people? Where do you go? How do you vet them? What do you do? As team is so critical from going to 0 to 1 and even 1 to 10.
I'm going to sound like a total cliche, but I'm going to say it anyways. Make sure that you're honest with yourself about where you are weak.
Yeah.
Nobody is strong everywhere. And I am not the greatest detail person. I am not the greatest at keeping a solid calendar. I'm not a great operator. I brought in a co-founder just 6 months after starting the company, and she is all those things. She's an operator. She's a detail person. She has a memory like an elephant, man. Yeah. She can remember the names of people she interviewed 3 years ago that are pros on our platform. I mean, it's insane. Yeah. Know where you're weakest and where you're most vulnerable, and hire those areas first. And you should be okay and that's going to change. Yeah. It's going to change. So sometimes you think to yourself, well, I can do this for now because it's not as important. I will also tell you that having an accountant that you trust is really, really important. Yeah. And it's not from a theft perspective. It's from a being honest with you perspective, because most entrepreneurs will outspend themselves into a bad spot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You get a little bit of money and you hire 6 people and you're like, whoa, that's not smart. You probably should have just hired 2. See how it went, then hire 1 more, but you well, I need this person, I need this person, I need this person. We're going to be good for 6 months, so we're good. And it's like, okay, 6 months comes pretty fast. Yeah. And now you're under the gun of what am I going to do, right?
Right.
So that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
And honestly, not another total cliche, but find mentors. Yeah. I have so many great mentors. I have so many people that I can call on and just say, all right, I'm freaking out here. We just got this opportunity, or I hired somebody and I got over my skis, and I don't have enough money to pay everybody that I've hired. I mean, because that was a problem 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. And when you're early stage, it happens. It's like, okay, you're banking on this deal that is going to come in. Yeah. No, it's going to happen. So I got to get ahead of this. So I have the people I need. And so you hire before you win. And that happens a lot. I've learned that lesson. You don't hire until you win. Yeah. I like the mentor piece. I think that goes not undervalued, but it is kind of the hack in a lot of companies to be able to, in a lot of founder journeys, to be able to lean on people who've done it before or have an insight that, or even just could extract you from the moment to have you see kind of a grander view. Mentors are definitely key. I know we're coming to the close of the episode, but before we do, one last question. What books or people, whether it was early in your career or now, have influenced you the most? Oh, wow. Well, I mentioned Jim Collins, Good to Great is a great book. I love listening to podcasts. I'm a big podcast fan. So I should have had notes in front of me on the podcasts and books that I listen to. Adam Grant, thank you. It came Taken for Granted I'm a big fan of Adam Grant's. Yeah. I'm also a big fan of, there's a new book that I've just finished and I've been reading, and I've been listening to it, so I'm actually just going to pull it up here. It's called Speaking Peace. Speaking Peace is by Bill Rosenberg, and it was if you've heard of nonviolent communication,
Yeah.
he wrote the nonviolent communication. But this Speaking Peace is actually better than the nonviolent communication, in my opinion.
Right.
And the reason for it is practical. It gives you practical lessons, and it teaches you the difference between feelings and needs.
Yeah.
And and when you manage people, and that even can be your kids. He uses the example of your children. It's like, I need you to clean up your room. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't need them to clean up your room. You'd like them to clean up their room, and here's the reason why.
Yeah.
But you go down this path, and when I ask you to do it and you don't do it, how does it make me feel? Right.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't respect the house. I feel like you don't respect me. I feel like you don't respect yourself.
Yeah.
But you go and you kind of dissect it, because usually people use the terms, and this is why I really like this book, is they use terms that are emotionally charged.
Mm-hmm.
You never listen to me. You don't trust me.
Yeah.
I can't trust you. It's like, hold on a second. It's like,
Let's extract the reasons. Yeah.
Hold on. Why do you feel you don't trust me? Well, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you're upset because I didn't do this. Let's talk about why.
Yeah.
But I think this book is just really, I mean, it's making me think. I don't mean to get on a book report here, but it's just super. I mean, as I'm driving to work, I've been like,
Yeah.
I can put this in practice, and I'm actually dealing with some of these things in my home and work every day. So it's pretty fun. So so I would definitely recommend Speaking Peace, and I have 1,000 books.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great place to start. And I love the communication bit, because it's something we can always improve, and something I think I talk about in my personal relationships a lot now, and learn a little bit more about how to communicate the exact kind of reason or purpose or feeling or motivation, and how much more important that is than the conclusive thought, and moving backwards from there. It's like you're moving through it in a progressive way, and that's a cool thing. I'll add that to my reading list. And I know we're coming close to the end of the episode, and I want to give you a chance to give us your plugs. So tell us where we can find you. Tell us where we can support, and LinkedIn, your websites. Where can we be a part of Yellowbird and you as a founder and support?
Well, anybody who wants to link in with me, I post a fair amount, and I always try to give some levels of wisdom about things I'm learning, both in health and safety as well as in life. So it's michael.zale, Z-A-L-L-E, LinkedIn/michael.zale. Our website is goyellowbird.com. It's yellowbird.com. I cannot seem to get the yellowbird.com because the guy won't sell it to me. And I'm also fighting with Yellowbird Hot Sauce, who's got way more money than I do. So I'm never going to get it. So goyellowbird.com is going to be where I'm stuck forever. And if anybody has ideas or interests or things that they want to talk to me about, feel free to DM me. I try to respond to my direct messages as long as I'm not getting pitched. I do get pitched a fair amount, and I'm happy to give guidance and mentorship to anybody who's interested. But it's becoming a problem on LinkedIn where, of my 50 messages a day, 3 of them were people who actually
want to talk. Yeah, exactly. Well, Michael, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show and going through your journey and what you're working on at Yellowbird, and all the wisdom that you shared. I appreciate, and I know our audience will. So thank you again for being on the show, and I hope you enjoyed yourself on Behind Company Lines.
Hey, I loved it, man. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course.